Hey everyone, thank you for joining my lightning talk today. Today I'm going to be telling you a story about Deploybot. So let's get started. Chapter 1. The Idea. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a publicly traded tech company that helped creator educators create and sell online courses, build vibrant communities, and monetize memberships all on a single scalable platform. The company was amazing, with talented engineers building and shipping cool features to their customers on a regular basis. There was one small problem, though. Every time a feature or change was ready to be shipped to production and made available to customers, the engineer performing the deployment would have to spend a lot of time manually babysitting their deployment and performing status updates to keep their peers up to date on the deploy status. Along with this, there was no clean way for managing the deploy queue and knowing when you're good to proceed with your deploy. Everything had to be managed manually, as you can see on the right here, and I'm sure all of you are used to, wasting a lot of time for engineers during deployments when they could have been doing other things in that time. As per the expected climate in the region, one fine week in April, there were predicted blue skies all week long, leading to Blue Sky Week. This meant it was time for innovation and improvement. The topic of painful deployments was chosen, and the process began. The initial idea was small but powerful in scope, and it was as follows. Make a Slack bot that can help handle queues for deployments so we know who is currently deploying to production and which service that they are actually deploying. And use the concepts of locks to achieve this. Implement the ability to call dibs on a lock and to release it when you're done, and have one lock exclusively per service. The idea was pitched to the company by an engineer by the name of Shreyas Developer Kerr, and a small but mighty team was assembled that began their work. Days passed, and the team worked hard. They achieved a lot in their first week working on this new bot. They had actually, by the end of the week, built a lock table in DynamoDB that stored details about the various locks and had one lock per service, which could store the current owner of that lock. They had also built the ability for the bot to communicate with Semaphore and retrieve statuses about an ongoing production deploy for a given service with a single slash command and return that result to Slack. But unfortunately, blue skies became covered in clouds with some layoffs that occurred at the same time, and the team had to put the project on pause. But they knew this was not the end. The story had just begun. Chapter 2. The Evolution. The initial progress of the project was amazing, but on its own it was not sufficient to solve the problem of manually managed deployments, because there was still no way to handle status updates or release notifications. But anything that is born must evolve, like Pokemon. And thus, more work was done to improve the bot and evolve it to be ready for use within the company by all engineers. It has been a few months since the bot was introduced to the Team Devs channel and has been used by engineers every time they want to deploy some code. Let's take a look at the features that Deploybot now supports after its evolved state and how we can best use it to maximize efficiency in our deployment workflows. Let's start by looking at the use case for production deploys. Let's say I'm ready to deploy some monolith code to production. The workflow would go something like this. The first thing I would do is issue the dibs command from the Team Devs channel and pass in the lock that I wish to acquire. When you do this, Deploybot will send you a private message asking if you wish for your deployment to go out solo or not. Based on your selection, a message will be posted in the channel. If no one currently owns the lock, the message will indicate that you have claimed the lock. If someone currently does own the lock, the message will mention that you've called dibs and are waiting for your turn. Now you can merge the PRs that will form the part of the deployment, and you can relax. As the deployment progresses, Deploybot will monitor the status of the deploy and notify you at important steps in the process. When your tests pass and the deploy is ready to be promoted, you'll receive a notification in Slack. All you have to do is promote the deploy and then let Deploybot handle updating status messages in Slack notifying everyone else what state the deploy is currently at, whether the test passed, whether the promotions passed, or whether the actual deploy and post actions completed successfully. Now, once the deploy successfully completes, you'll be informed and asked by the bot to release the lock. If you have verified the changes and everything looks good, you can just press the release button and Deploybot will automatically release the lock and assign it to the next person in the queue, notifying them that it is their turn to deploy. If, however, you need to hold on to the lock for a bit longer, you can do so, but please remember to release the lock when you are done with it. If someone kicks off a deployment without acquiring the lock, the functionality of the status updates, release notifications, and messaging will not work as expected. If anything goes wrong at any point in the deployment pipeline, Deploybot will notify you directly in Slack with a failure release notification, with details about the exact step that failed and actions you can take to resolve the issue. Now, the cool thing is, Deploybot is not restricted for use in prod only. It also works and can provide value for staging deploys. Anytime you merge code to the staging branch, you want to know when the staging deploy step passes, because that is the core indicator about when your code is live on staging. You don't want to have to monitor semaphore to know when this happens, so let Deploybot tell you. If you want to enable this functionality, all you have to do is issue one single command. And the good news is you only have to issue this command once in your life. When you issue the notify staging command and pass in your GitHub account email address, you'll be set up for release notifications and staging moving forward. Oh, and also any failures on your staging deploy will also result in notifications. And of course, if it passes, you'll be receiving the notification and you'll know that your changes are live in staging. You'll be set for staging deploys. Now, some additional commands and functionality that the bot supports, and which are maybe not as commonly used, are shown here. In the situation where something has gone wrong and you need to release the lock on behalf of someone else, you can use the force release command to release a lock that you don't own yourself. The owner command can be used to help identify the current owner of a lock. Let's say perhaps you need to contact the owner and indicate or ask them if they maybe forgot to release the lock. The pipeline status command allows you to peek at the status of a given pipeline without leaving the comfort of Slack. It'll return to you a result like this, indicating what stage the current deployment is at. Now it's time to start looking into the architecture and how this bot was actually built. So that leads us to chapter 3, architecture. So essentially, a Slack bot utilizes API endpoints provided by the Slack platform to receive messages, trigger actions, and send responses. It acts as a mediator between users and the Slack API, utilizing the API endpoints to communicate with the Slack platform and perform its intended functions. It exposes API endpoints that can be hit and that perform specific tasks. That generic description summarizes Deploybot's architecture pretty well too. Essentially, Deploybot manages a set of global locks represented as objects in a DynamoDB table. The code for it is containerized and runs in a Lambda function, where a single AWS API gateway route feeds in the requests sent from the app in Slack, as well as handles notifications received from Semaphore. The bot uses the data in those requests, as well as the info in the DynamoDB table, to determine what to do next and who to communicate with and respond to within Slack. Now, looking at the actual data store, we have the following columns for every single lock or service type that the bot supports. The user ID column represents the Slack ID of the user who currently owns the lock and is deploying at the moment. The timestamp field stores the timestamp or unique identifier for the message that Deploybot posts for the current user, so that we know which message to keep updating whenever status changes in Semaphore for the given pipeline. The dips field stores a list of user IDs who wish to deploy next, and the timestamps field stores their respective message timestamps, which will replace the current user ID and current timestamp field when that user acquires the lock and becomes the current user. The notifier and notifier user ID fields are used similarly, but for handling the staging deploy release notifications. Now, one of the most interesting parts of Deploybot is how it handles release notifications. Some of you may be aware of the project that was started by the Power Rangers team a while ago to implement release notifications for our pipelines. It was added for staging deploys and would notify users on failures, but did not support production notifications. A big pain point for this project was figuring out how to link the GitHub user's commit to the Slack user ID so the bot knows who to notify when something important happens. A bunch of custom code had to be written to make this link behind the scenes, allowing the release notifications to work as expected. The beauty of Deploybot is that since everything is based on locks and ownership, the bot always knows who to send the release notification to. It's a hidden gem of the implementation and helps solve a big pain point that was faced before. We don't need to link the GitHub user to the Slack user because we know that the owner of the lock is the person who needs to get notified. And we can just send the notification right away when we receive that info from Semaphore. Now, that's about Deploybot's current evolution and architecture. But what's next? What's planned to come in the future? Well, these are some of the features that are queued up to be worked on. So first one is a PR queue where users can add PRs for future deploys for a given lock. So that way, when someone claims a lock, they automatically get a list of PRs that people would like to be included as part of that deployment. That would be pretty cool. A few minor things like ability to undibs your dibs call. Let's say you call dibs and now you don't really need to deploy anymore. A way to get out of the queue until or before you actually acquire the lock. Reminders to release the lock if the post actions fail, because technically the deploy still passed, but maybe something just went wrong and you actually are done, so you need to release. Showing the link to Semaphore for easy access to the actual deployment pipeline, and notification for stopped or canceled deploys in staging. And if you have anything that you'd like to add as features that do get implemented, or if you notice a bug or an issue, then please visit the GitHub repo to create an issue there. We'll keep a track of feature requests and issues there. And also, if you're wanting to contribute, then please reach out to me, and it would be great to have more support. Thanks for listening, and hope this was helpful and informative, and hope you continue using Deploybot and see some benefits from it. Cheers.